Good evening. Welcome to the City of Glendale Historic Preservation Commission meeting of June 15th. May I have roll call? How about while you're doing that, I will report that the agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, June 12th, 2017, on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. So we're going to go to the approval of the minutes, but first we'll have roll call.
Commissioner Crignati?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
Chair Vidor?
Here.
All are present.
And Commissioner Vartanian's out.
Lorna Vartanian.
Commissioner Vartanian is not here.
Is not here, yes. Okay, thank you very much. And we have the minutes from the last meeting, so does anybody have any additions or corrections, changes, anything?
I do not.
No.
Mike? No? Okay.
No. We're getting better on these.
Yes. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Second.
I second.
Okay, roll call on the minutes approval.
Oh, I'm not even positive. I think you do roll
We can
call
just say they're approved?
that. Let's just do it.
Let's just do that.
No,
Okay.
no. Just to be safe, we'll do the roll call. I'm not positive how that works always.
All right.
Commissioner Crignati?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Chair Vidor?
Yes.
Approved.
All right. Do we have any, I don't have any cards for oral communications, so I am assuming we don't have any. So we'll go right to comments from commissioners. Anybody?
I have some. First of all, I would like to thank the City of Glendale. They had a kind of soiree, and all the commissioners and the board members were given this vinyl, I don't know what you call it,
Folio.
a folio.
It's
Anyway,
portfolio.
Simulated fine grain leather.
exactly. Anyway, from my most favorite city, I thank you very much. It's very, very, very nice. I also would like to thank Sean Purcell and Robin Fye and the Glendale Historical Society for the tour they gave of Casa Verdugo. I was, even somebody who's been here for as long as I've been here, it was amazing to walk around the streets with the unofficial mayor of Casa Verdugo, Sean Purcell, and just pointing out all of the buildings. And like the Glendale Historical Society says right at the moment, this is the year of the craftsmen, and there are quite a few craftsmen that are still there. I was just surprised. Anyway, I enjoyed it immensely, and I just want to thank Sean and Robin and everyone that was there at the Historical Society putting it on. Next, I would like to do a little thing on the Crescenta Valley Historical Society. Their next meeting is this next coming Monday, and they're having it on LA's Lonely Lion. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, are local mountains, though minutes from one of the largest urban centers in the world, are host to several types of large predators. Perhaps the most impressive is the mountain lion, who seems to thrive in the midst of civilization. P22, the mountain lion living in the Hollywood Hills, is an amazing example of this top-end predator's adaptability. This is his story, and the larger story of our most terrifying neighbor, the urban mountain lion. The presenter, Terry Saunderstrom, is a docent at the Los Angeles Zoo. It's this next coming Monday, June 19th at 7 p.m. at the La Crescenta Center for Spiritual Living. It's located on the corner of Dunsmore and Santa Carlotta. And we'd like you to all come up and enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
And last but not least, we have one more thing. This is, yes. Sometimes history sometimes reemerges when you least expect it or didn't even know it ever existed in the first place. Take Mr. Brand's touring card, relocated by our chairperson, Arlene Vidor. We all know Montrose was founded on Washington's birthday, February 22nd, 1913. If you didn't, now you know. The developers, J. Frank Walters and Robert A. Walton, were hoping for a bonanza of sales for their newly graded lots, some of which sold immediately, but many did not in the first few days. A trolley line was promised, but how? Robert A. Walton's brother-in-law was in the railroad construction business back east. A few letters and a short month later, the railroad was under construction from Verdugo Park to Montrose, arriving on April 13. But who was Robert A. Walton, developer and now railroad owner? Robert A. Walton was the son of Tisdale and Nancy Walton, born in Asheville, North Carolina, March 1875, to what would be a large family. When Robert was 20, he enlisted in the United States Army at St. Augustine, Florida in 1895. After his service, mustering out a few years later, Robert, a hosteler, I guess that's how you pronounce it, somebody who deals with hotels, I believe, moved to California. Robert was a partner in the Frederick A. Holmes Company, a real estate company. With Mr. Holmes' retirement in 1908, Robert continued as the Holmes Walton Company, developing the area now known as Montrose, La Crescenta, and Oakdale. In July of 1915, the citizens of those three areas were so happy with his efforts to build up the region we now call the Crescenta Valley and increase their property values, they had a ceremony and presented him with a silver cup, thanking him for his efforts. Mr. Walton left the valley in 1917, fading from view, but staying in the Southern California area. And here's where it gets kind of interesting. Flash forward, May 2017. The Crescenta Valley Chamber of Commerce was contacted by an antique dealer in Maine. He had just purchased some items from a friend, and one of the items was this silver cup you see on the screen. Long forgotten and hardly remembered, the antique dealer, recognizing the historic value of this cup and that it survived the decades, wanted to return it to its long-lost home. The Historic Society was contacted by the Chamber, and we have determined the silver cup's authenticity and of the event long ago when Montrose was but 2.5 years old. Other than some paper items, this cup is the oldest artifact from Montrose beginnings 104 years ago. With a little luck, this historic relic will again be coming back to the valley of its origin, where its owner one time was presented with the memento, never realizing how the area he found it has grown and prospered. If you want to know more about it, contact cvhistory.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. Very cool.
Very interesting.
It is cool.
Anyone else?
No.
No.
Okay, I have one question, and you may want to defer me to updates, Jay. I'm not sure where this belongs, but I just wanted to know if anything has transpired in your discussions about the HPC doing a consultative review of commercial and institutional structures that are highly visible and also national landmark properties, if there is going to be something built adjacent to them.
Yeah, the topic's been raised within the staff in CDD. It hasn't gone up to city manager or city attorney at this point. So all I can say now is hopefully by next month we'll have a little more discussion about that so we can get some, ultimately it would require an ordinance change, so that would be the direction we'd have to move to do that. But we haven't even really taken the discussion far enough to, it's definitely not forgotten.
Okay, well, that's good. And I would just like to commend the city of Glendale on the 75th anniversary of the City Hall building. There was a celebration on June 3rd. It was very nice. There was a great singing group. It was well attended. I have to admit, though, that there was a ceremony during this activity, and the preservation community and the Historic Preservation Commission were not included in that, and it was a little disappointing to me that the preservationists and the commission, which has a role in the city's preservation of historic buildings, was not asked to participate. But it was a great event.
No staff, yeah.
Okay. Onward. So if nobody has any other comments, we don't have any old business, so we'll go right to new business and 7A, 1051 Mountain Street. So if you're ready,
Thank you, Chair
let's
Bedore.
go.
Commissioners, tonight we are considering a Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for 1051 West Mountain Street. So 1051 West Mountain Street is a single-family residence, and it's located in the North Cumberland Heights Historic District, and it is a contributor to this district, as shown on this map. The house was originally constructed in 1933 and built in the Spanish colonial revival style. The first known owner of the house was George Hathaway, as evidenced by an original building permit issued to Mr. Hathaway in 1932. He commissioned the Hunt brothers to serve as the contractors for the house. The Hunt brothers operated their construction company in Burbank, and they worked on a number of projects in the broader Los Angeles region. Mr. Hathaway was a business owner, and he lived in the house until 1935, when the property was acquired by a pilot named Joseph B. Glass. The property changed hands again when Harry W. and Leah R. Polk bought the house in 1945, and the house was sold again in 1951 to John W. Barneswell. 2 years later, a local dentist bought the house in 1953, and the current owners bought the property in 2015. As mentioned before, the property is designed in the Spanish colonial revival style, and the house retains a number of its character-defining features. For example, at the front facade, we have a projecting one-story wing, the red clay tile roof with multiple roof lines, and a wing wall adjacent to the house, as well as the clay tile attic fence, as seen here. There are also a number of original divided light wood windows with horizontal muntins, a picture window, and stucco-clad walls, and also these interesting board and batten shutters that might be original. There's also a inset balcony at the southeast corner of the front facade, and an entry porch with shouldered arched openings at the front facade as well. And the house also has its original door and decorative elements such as a speakeasy and metal strap hinges. There's also a porte cochere which extends alongside the porch and also has the same shouldered arched openings as seen here. And then moving on to alterations. So the house appears to have undergone some changes over the years. The most significant was the replacement of a number of original wood windows, close to 27. It's not sure when these replacements were made, but this image shows one of the original windows and how the replacement window has a different muntin configuration compared to the original ones. And these replacements have been made all around the house. At the front facade, we have the replacement windows at the second story level, as seen here. And on the east facade, where the porte cochere is, all of the windows appear to be replaced. And then at the west facade, all of the windows also appear to be replaced as well. And at the rear facade, all of the windows also appear to be replaced. And then other alterations include a possible infill at the northeast corner at the rear of the property. As you can see, French doors have been added, and the room now serves as an additional sitting area attached to the main kitchen and dining room. It's likely that the second story projected over the first story and was infilled at this section. You can see the faint outline of where the wall in the house originally likely ended, where the arrows are pointing. We also have a detached garage at the rear facade. The garage door has been replaced with the wood door, but this appears to be appropriate to the historic style of the house. A pool was also added in 1956, and flagstone pavers at a later date. Concrete steps were also added, leading from a raised sitting area to the pool at a later date as well. So overall, 1051 West Mountain Street does retain a number of its key character-defining features and has a high degree of historic integrity, but with the exception of the windows that have been replaced. Given the extent of how many windows have been replaced, an important aspect of the house's integrity has been compromised. For these reasons, staff believes the property could be potentially eligible for listing under Criterion 3 only if a Mills Act condition calling for the appropriate replacement of the non-original windows is imposed. Specifically, all of the replacement windows should be removed and new wood windows installed with true divided lights, horizontal muntins matching the material, configuration, operation, design, and details of the original windows. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions before we open the public hearing?
I do.
Okay.
Looking on page 4, it seems like the two paragraphs are kind of arguing against each other on it.
You want to kind of elaborate
Be
on
more
that?
specific.
Well, okay, it says on the first paragraph, despite these changes, the overall house retains good historic integrity, with the exception of the window replacements. North Cumberland Heights District Survey found the house to have excellent integrity, and then it goes on to the fact about a windshield survey. But the next paragraph, it says about the Mills Act, the Mills Act contract condition calling for the appropriate replacement of the non-original windows. Because of the extent of this replacement and the limited number of original windows remaining on the property, Staff recommends that the commission weigh the merits of this work, which would not make up for the loss of the building's material integrity. Well, on one hand, we have historic integrity, and it's just the windows, the material integrity is what, it seems like they're arguing both sides of the fence.
We are, in a way. This is a nomination that kind of fell somewhere into a bit of a gray area, and we thought it was worth hearing from the commission how you valued using the Mills Act to make replacements. What we're arguing in the second paragraph is the idea there's 7 levels of integrity, but the 2 we're focusing on here are material integrity and design integrity. We've already lost the material integrity of the windows that were replaced, so that's done.
Right.
If the commission was inclined to see this house as in every other way eligible for the register, and you felt that imposing a condition for the windows to bring back what we believe is the appearance that we see in the earlier windows that we know are early on the house, we would be saying that we could restore some of the design integrity of the house, where we'd bring back that Munton pattern, the proportions and overall appearance of the windows. I'm not crazy about having a staff report that isn't black and white, but this house and the condition we were looking at, plus some of our previous discussions about how we want to use the Mills Act and the extent of what level of work we want to see done, and also with some of the problems we've run into, I thought it was appropriate to kind of leave it a little open-ended to kind of generate some discussion from the commission, because we take our guidance for things like this and then give advice to future homeowners based on the direction that we take from Preservation Commission.
Well, I do have another question. The picture that you have right now, it appears that the original windows tend to be more square versus the other ones are more rectangular.
It's the panes.
The panes.
If you see, Spanish colonial revival houses often, we can't say there's one type of window that was appropriate to the style. In this case, we believe that these windows that you see mainly in the living room are the earlier windows. They have kind of integral hinges at the top and bottom. They have the pull-down screens that I believe are part of the original window assembly. And the horizontal Munton configuration is very typical. It's probably the most typical window style for the Spanish colonial revival. The windows that were the replacements have those heavier horizontal Muntons, but they also have thinner, kind of lighter vertical Muntons.
Okay.
And that configuration isn't typical of any one style or another. It's not really colonial revival. If I saw a Spanish house that I believed had original windows with that configuration, it wouldn't shock me. But here we just know that there's been a change.
Anybody have, do either of you have any
I have
questions?
one other question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I keep,
On the front balcony, the door to the front balcony, I know you don't have a really good picture of it. Unfortunately, when I went there, I didn't check the door itself, but it seems like the door may have been replaced. You really can't see, but the panes of glass tend to look like the newer versions of the replaced windows rather than the original.
And that's a possibility, yeah.
Yeah, just looking at it from the picture I have, and I didn't really check it out when I was there, unfortunately. So it just wasn't added onto the list. So, you know, were we to do this, I feel that it should at least be checked out and added onto the list.
Yeah, my memory is we weren't as certain about that, because you could have doors that don't necessarily have the same Munton configuration, a more typical French door kind of look. But in Spanish, you often do have French doors that just have the horizontal Muntons on each leaf of the double door or something. And that was a double door, if I remember.
Is it similar to the one at the rear?
I think they were the same, and they were
Is
multi-light.
it similar to this one?
Well, this is the one that we know is a later change.
Yeah, no.
So it could, if we found out it was exactly the same as that and we thought that was a later replacement, that would be good evidence.
that's not a replacement, or it is?
That is.
Yeah.
This is in the area that we think was infilled, where you see the scarring on the stucco. One of the things we were looking at, you look at hinges, the newer the windows that we believe are newer, the quality wasn't quite there that you would see on an older window. Some of the joints were pulling apart, which you wouldn't expect on a window that's not super, super old. And I can't remember that we looked at the doors at the same level. So don't remember if we talked about those as much. So depending on where the commission takes this, I'm sorry.
We didn't look super closely.
Where the commission takes this, if you're inclined to designate and want to add that as a condition, where the condition would be that we would conduct further in situ research and then decide whether the door should be replaced, we can do that.
Okay, I have a couple questions. With respect to stuccoing pattern, when you have an addition or we do have some added square footage on this house, correct? And the stucco pattern is slightly different. Do you consider that, I mean, we have some subtle variations in the windows that are considered to be problematic. What about the stucco pattern? Is that considered to be something that needs correction if it's identifiably different than the original stucco pattern?
Yeah, we couldn't say for sure that this was the original stucco on the house anyways. At one point I thought maybe it had been changed, but there was nothing definitive. The real issue with the stucco is you can see the patching. You can see the junction between where the old corner and the old wall would have been and the new wall was built. And that's just kind of typical. You often have cracking in those locations. You often have scarring. In some ways, that's not a bad thing because that's what helps us see that there is a change. But I don't think, we wouldn't differ on a little addition like that. Say someone came to the commission or in a historic district where it's an easy decision. If someone were infilling a notch where there was an overhanging second floor, and it was just 10 feet on one side and 3 feet on the other side, we wouldn't ask for a different stucco pattern there to differentiate it. We'd want that stucco to just kind of look like the rest, but you might still be able to see where the addition was made.
Are all the replacement windows wood?
Yeah.
I believe they are. Okay, that's all the questions I have. So we can open up the public hearing now, and I think the first speaker is going to be Tim Gregory. And then we'll hear from the owners.
Afternoon. I know when I first parked in front of the house, I thought, well, this is a nice Spanish colonial, but I didn't think it was anything special until I looked at some of the features a little more closely, such as the decorative, roughly hewn board and batten shutters, which I thought were, I'm sure, are original to the house, and the shoulder arches along the front porch and the porte cochere where they come to it. There's a level place, and instead of a round arch like you see on Spanish houses, this is more of like a modern kind of idea that makes it stand out, I think. And the rustic front door with all the strapping, I think that's really special on the house. And the boards on the balcony, they're almost Swiss-like. They're not so Spanish-like. They're close together, and the way they have the little cutouts, that was kind of unique. And then the massing of the house, I mean, it's very irregularly massed, and there's something artistic about it. It could feel like it was thrown together, but it really isn't. And I've run across other houses that the Hunt brothers have done, and mostly in Burbank, and they tend to be kind of modest. This house is kind of a large, fancy one for them. And it was, I'm sure, custom designed for Mr. Hathaway. And it's a shame we don't know who the architect was, because I'm sure there was one involved. I guess I was having an off day, but I just didn't notice the change in the windows. And it amazes me that 27 windows could be changed with no building permit.
Welcome to
Glendale.
But I think what often happens is, it might have happened around 1977 when they put the deck in, because I found in so many cities they'll issue a permit and then they expand the work. And as long as the building inspector says it's okay, they don't bother to reissue the permit, and that often happens. And so I have a feeling it might have been shoehorned into that. I don't know. But anyway, I think it is really a special house, and it's in the details that really show up. So I hope you will go ahead with the Register and the Mills Act application. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? If you were to characterize the distinctive features of the house, that sets it above your garden variety house or your generic house that you see in an architecture book, what would those be?
Well, I think the ones I mentioned, like the shoulder arches, to me I haven't found that in every Spanish house, the arches with the little lift and then the straight part in the front. There's almost isn't an arch, an arch is on the side, but not on the top. That was the first thing I saw that intrigued me. And the rough hewn shutters and doors, the front door, I think.
What do we know what the shutters are made of, those real rustic-looking shutters?
Wood.
They're
I mean, they're
wood.
wood, but any particular treatment, or, because they
They're
do...
kind of distressed in an
Battered.
interesting
Call
way.
them
They
battered.
were either gouged out with a chisel, or I've even seen wood where you take heavy chains and you beat the wood and it leaves impressions on it.
They call it battered sometimes.
Yeah, they're board and batten style. But the thing is that shutters are often one of the first things to go on a house because they're exposed to weather on both sides. We can't say for sure that these are original, but they certainly look
think
interesting
so.
and they look appropriate. But
I think they're probably painted. I have a feeling they might have been natural wood at one time.
Well, I have to, maybe I'll save it until the owner speaks, so,
Okay.
thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Okay, so are you coming up together or one at a time? Julie, you want to go first, or Mark? Lovewell? Mark and Julie Lovewell. Thank you.
I want to thank the commission just for having this opportunity to speak and have the application for review. With regard to your technical definition of special, obviously it's special to us.
Yeah, right.
So I enjoyed the conversation.
Distinctive.
Distinctively special. It is unique to us. I can't say that we're experts, certainly in architecture design, but we thought that there was a number of things that are unique. I think the roof line with the particular tile style seems to be a little different than oftentimes what we see in the neighborhood. The balcony design, we kind of think that it's a combination between Spanish colonial revival and French Provence influence somewhere in there, among other things. We haven't seen too many examples of that, so we kind of think that, the brains of the operation here kind of suggests that it's a little more flavored that way. The windows, Jay, as he pointed it out, that caught me by surprise too, because we kind of have a pretty keen eye, we like to think, and we looked at some examples of the mullions later, similar to the living room windows, and I think you nailed it. What I can't figure out though is that the windows themselves, particularly upstairs, if it's a matter of the sun beating down on the grain of the wood or whatever, but they really look old. I mean, we've tried to repair some of them. The sun has beat down where the grain has been raised up significantly in a lot of the spots. In fact, they don't even close right. There's gaps. But if that is indeed the case, and we're fortunate enough to get your approval, then we would certainly make a commitment in replacing it and doing it right. The one caveat I thought was part of the report was that the one side of the house that is not visible, I thought we may catch a break there as far as replacing those. I seem to think that. But if that's not the case, we love historical homes. I've owned historical homes in the past, dating back in Sonora in the late 20s. So this is kind of our thing, and we hope for your review and approval.
Again, thank you so much. We're ever so grateful for people like you who care about historical properties. We certainly do. We love to travel, and that's what we like, is old architecture. And to own a piece of that history, we're very happy and really, really appreciative that people like you want to preserve it for future generations. Certainly, old houses like these could have been torn down before we even saw them, any of us here. But somebody preserved it, and we want to be one of those people that preserve it for future generations. And in regard to the question about the door on the front
Can't see
in the
picture.
bedroom,
The balcony door. Yeah.
it's a little bit confusing from the dark picture. But you can see on the right side there actually is a window that's replaced. That would be one that we would have to replace. On the left side is a single panel door,
The mullions are different.
but it is original.
Yeah.
And it has the old time deadbolt lock on it, and the original muntins that you're talking about that look like the living room windows. And there's a back door to another, on the back side of the house, there's another patio, little balcony, and it also has the original door. I think, Arlene, you took a picture of the old time lock that was on.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, I did.
That is the same.
That was a giveaway.
I mean, we would replace it if we had to, no question, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, on the thing about the mixed styles of Provence, and, I mean, eclecticism is an issue in Southern California, one that I grapple with, because it's hard for me not to think as a purist, but I've accepted it and even embraced it, because sometimes it elevates a house to something unique. Can you point to any features in the house that you consider to be kind of paying homage to the Provence style?
Well,
or does it just remind you?
yes, having been there many times, and we hope to retire there someday, we actually do see some of the differences. For one thing, in many of the Spanish colonial revival homes in Glendale, you see a variety of colors of Spanish tile. And very typical in Provence, you might see something that has a Spanish look. The exterior, I mean, it's even in Italy, you can kind of see some
Sure. Are there
going
any-
across the Mediterranean. However, there is not one single Spanish tile in that house, inside or out. And that seems to me to make it slightly less Spanish and slightly more Mediterranean in general.
I think another, if you take out exclude the front living room area that jets out in this L configuration, it's, you know, I'm not the expert, but if you looked at just that back all the way across and without the carport structure, that you would think, well, maybe it's sort of a Monterey, sort of something rather, but the living room jets out. And I think that's kind of unique. That was pointed out as something a little different than just a rectangular Monterey style. I think that's different. I think the balcony is a little different. It was pointed out, the railing being a little bit almost Swiss influence or French or something. And I think Tim pointed out, it would have been nice to get a sense of what the architect documentation back in the day, what he had. That would have been kind of an interesting study, just to see where's the nuances that he's drawing from on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
for your
so
time.
much.
Okay, so I think now we have comments from the commissioner, so Mike, do you want to start?
I'll start. Well, I want to thank the owners of the house, the Lovewells. I mean, it's a beautiful house. It's, you know, it's right in the most perfect area, I think, in Glendale, right next to Casa de Carmen, even though I don't like that name. And
The Jensen House.
anyway, it,
Oh, well, officially we can call it the Jensen House.
oh, can we? Oh, well, thank you. It's right next door to the
You
Jensen
may.
House, which is what it always should have been. Homes are designed to be next to other houses usually, and I think this sits very well in the area that it's in. You know, it's in the North Cumberland Heights area. It's very nice. I mean, I am troubled with the things that the staff has brought up, which are the windows, but houses do age and things need to be replaced. And when they're replacing them, they're not replacing with the idea that they're going to be on the Mills Act or on the Glendale Register. So I have to give them kind of a pass that way, but it would be definitely what the staff has said. If we do consider putting this on the Glendale Register, all of those things would have to be done, and maybe a check at some of the other doors, even though you've taken pictures of them on it.
Well, there was one that was debatable, but it had a very interesting latch that kind of put it in the 20s or 30s.
I'll go with that.
Just one
So
door.
I would like to hear what the rest of my commissioners say. I mean, it sits well on the property. The pool is of the 1950s variety, and the flagstones in the back are of, a little bit later in time period. But when you look at it and you look at the picture that's on the screen right now, it is, I don't want to say the word imposing, but it's a little bit different than a lot of the Spanish Mediterranean revival homes that we have seen. But we have a lot of them on the Glendale Register, which is my only concern. And you want a house, because we have so many wonderful houses, that you want it to at least be as good as or better than the other houses that are on the register. That's my only concern is the windows themselves, which the staff has already pointed out, and I'm sure it will be mentioned more than once again. So I will turn it over to my other commissioners.
If I could just throw, I'm looking at this, the image looks very distorted compared to the image that's on the screen. So I think the projector is doing something funny. It's stretching. So take that into mind. Yeah, I've never noticed that before, so I don't know if the settings got changed or something. So anyway.
Okay, Chris, or?
I'll go.
You'll go? Okay.
Thank you very much for bringing this before us. I apologize for not being able to make it this weekend, but I did drive by and look and take pictures from the street. And spent a lot of time looking at the architectural details because, like some of the commissioners have mentioned, there are a lot of Spanish-style houses, and to bring it forward for the exemplary example of Spanish colonial, we want to make sure that it's rising to the level to put it on the register. And as I spent more time with it, I found some very unique features. As mentioned, the arches are, very interesting, detailed style. The balcony I felt was as well, just the way it intersects with the roof. That's quite unusual for Glendale. I don't even know that we've seen that before. They usually, are overhanging the house or set back. And so I found that to be interesting, and that both balconies on the front and back, obviously, match in style, appear to be very original. So I liked that about the house, thinking that it does bring a different element to our collection if we would put it on the register. I do have to agree with staff as it relates to the windows. I feel for you, as we had to replace 32 windows, so 27, you're right below, and yeah, it's definitely an investment. But when you bring something before for not only the Register and Mills Act, and obviously reap the benefits of continuing to restore the property, I think that would be valuable for this house to have the windows brought back to what they were originally. So I would have to support staff's recommendations.
Chris?
Yes, thank you very much for bringing this very charming home forward. And I'm going to echo briefly the comments that the other commissioners have made about the plethora of Spanish-style homes we have. I pulled up the list of resources that's up until December of 2015, and I did a count. We have approximately 35 Spanish-style homes, which that makes up about 30% of our list. There's only 10 moderns, approximately 10 Tudors, only 5 craftsmen, which I know we're all very sad about at this point. So the point I'm getting at is the bar for Spanish-style homes is very high. The goal is, like Mike was saying, to kind of try to find ones that are unique and really set themselves apart. So I went through the list and did a Google Maps thing, a street view of some of these homes, and yours really does stand out. It's quite different. I agree with Desiree that the balcony is set back in a way that's not common. Usually they're kind of hanging off the front. It's just a really great house. I mean, I think the window situation is the window situation. That's the way it goes with these Mills Act houses. The goal is to bring them back. So I would certainly support that as a condition. But other than that, I think it's in pretty good shape. I mean, I'm always amazed that these homes can last as long as they have, and it's a testament to maybe there's only a couple of owners along the way. So thank you for bringing it forward, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, same for me, thank you. And thank you for the tour. I really appreciated the thoughtful way we went through the house together. I think that at first I was no, because I hadn't read the report. And after hearing the discussion and looking at some of the documentation, I agree also that there are distinctive features here in the balcony, in the rough-hewn, very rustic shutters, and in the arcades, and the shape of the arcades. What are they called? Shoulder arcades? Shoulder arches. And the configuration of the house itself with the different elevations is also pretty unique. There clearly are interesting observation about the lack of Spanish tile, too. Duly noted. I don't know whether that's accidental or not, but there certainly are elements of non-Spanish architecture in the Spanish colonial revival. Also, what about, and this is more a question, I know the tile roof isn't consistent, but there's this grooving in it. you know, the tiles are grooved, and I've never seen that before. Is that anything to discuss, or is that just, you know, because it's not a full set of grooved tiles, we just forget about it?
No, well, I thought most of the tiles had that. I didn't
Most of them
look
do,
everywhere,
but
and
there
it's
was-
definitely interesting. I haven't
Inter-
seen that. We gave
I've
it a
never
name,
seen it.
striated tiles, but
Yeah, I've
whatever,
never seen it.
grooved or, definitely interesting, and I think probably not unique, but unusual.
Okay. Well, here comes my dilemma. I just can't wrap my brain around replacing all these wood windows. I guess I keep, you know, and I'm just saying what I really believe. I understand that we have to be consistent, and there's nothing that gets more abuse architecturally in Glendale than windows. You know, good news is they didn't put aluminum sliders in, but you know, I
Our
think
job's
that
so much easier.
yeah,
They
you know,
should have.
we could just call it a modern Spanish mashup if they'd done that. But, you know, we always talk about that restoring a historic home is also a green initiative, and I'm just, I'm struggling with that. And if there was, you know, if you wanted to go ahead with landmarking and this became an issue, I would want to look at, you know, some long-term thing and maybe say certain ones could stay and certain ones could go. I don't know. I'm just struggling with that. And so I'm, you know, we're obviously going to reach a consensus or a majority, but I can't wrap my brain around replacing wood windows.
For wood windows.
For wood windows, yeah. And I realize that I'm wrong about that because historically you want to have integrity, but nevertheless, we don't have any material issues here with syncing the windows together. We have subtle design issues, and of course the verticality of those mutton divisions is an issue. But are there houses that we've landmarked with vertical muttons?
Oh, I can't say for sure with Spanish, probably. These are kind of tight. These are very vertical. They almost look more appropriate for a Tudor revival
Okay.
than for any of our other styles.
Okay. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
Let me ask a question, Jay. I'm trying to visualize what the window should look like, and I'm just looking at this picture. I'm trying to erase the vertical mutton from the equation. Is that ultimately what the spacing should be?
That would
Yes.
pretty much be it, yeah.
Because the other ones, is that then they would be more in line with the ones on the left? Because those almost feel like they might be more square, the ones on the
Yeah,
left.
the shape wouldn't be the same.
I don't think it would still be the same.
In general, you're never going to get exact same proportions from pane to pane. So you look for kind of consistency in something that scans well when you look across the facade. So generally when we're talking about replacement windows with people, we'll look at the height of the opening, and sometimes it's clear. You need to have 2 dividers and 3 panes, or you need 3 dividers and 4 panes, whatever it's going to be. And
So is it possible that could be a
what we
4
would
pane?
do is use this as a model, kind of take the proportion, the X to Y ratio of a standard pane, and see how that worked in the other ones, and bring it as close as possible. And usually that scans fine and works out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, you know, there's an argument made in the staff report that in order to meet criterion 3, the windows have to be corrected, but, you know, that won't solve, that's not addressing the problem of distinction necessarily. It's an aesthetic choice, I guess, so.
You mean the distinctive
The
characteristics?
distinctive characteristics. But anyway, that's where I'm at. I mean, to be perfectly blunt, after approving 1524 Majestic Way, which was, you know, a very extreme mashup, that, you know, I'm not sure we're being consistent in our assessments here. I mean, maybe it's just me. I'm not exactly with the program, I guess you could say. I think sometimes we apply certain standards and requirements to certain houses and maybe others to others, and, you know, where does artfulness stop and historic integrity begin? Where does architectural distinction and definition stop and artfulness begin?
Well, one of the things I consistently tell applicants when we're meeting is that history isn't always pretty. The prettiest solution isn't always the historically appropriate one, if that helps.
It's a good answer. All right. Okay, so are we at a point where we want more discussion, another round, or does somebody have a motion they want to try to pass?
I'm happy to make a motion, but I wanted to just address your concern about the windows for a second. I think as you look at the overall facade of the house and you look at the very wide, for lack of a more formal word, kind of almost chunky shouldered arches, that the windows are really important and critical that they be of a more square design in order to fit the design and kind of scale of the house. I think right now how they've turned into much more vertical, linear, almost elegant. I feel like this wants to be more square.
And the dominant feature is
Yeah.
the front facade with the arcade.
Yeah, and so I think that, like you say, they aren't aluminum sliders that we're saying, oh, this is obvious, they need to be replaced, but I think it is fairly obvious from a design perspective that wasn't the architect's original intent of those windows. And it'll provide a very different look when those windows get replaced, and I think very, very elegant look, very much more in keeping with kind of the massing of the house. So with that, I'm happy to make a motion if we're ready. Unless there's
Are
more
we
discussion.
ready to address the Mills Act requirements? Did we clarify what we're going to expect?
Well, what we generally do with DRB and with HPC is kind of read back the conditions that we've heard
Okay.
through your discussion, and then you can fine tune them if you'd like.
Let's
You
do
can also
that.
I think you've heard from the applicants already that they're willing to do this, but sometimes if you haven't got that certainty, you can look for people to nod that they're okay with something.
Okay, so you'll recap.
But I will go back. It's pretty simple in this case. We are going to require, from what I've heard, that all non-original windows be replaced with windows, new wood windows with true divided lights that will be based on the proportions of what we believe are the early, if not original, windows on the living room wing. And then we can add a condition that staff will conduct further research about the balcony doors to verify whether we believe they're original or not. And if we determine that they're not, you have a choice. It would probably be best to let staff work to determine what new doors might be most appropriate in those locations. We haven't returned to the commission with any conditions like that before, so. And I think that's everything I got from everyone.
And do we have a time frame for that we want to attach to the motion, or?
Yeah, we always want you to give us a time frame, and typically, depending on the perceived expense of something, you stretch the time frame. I think, in general, we've gone from 1 to 3 years for things like this.
I think 3 years would be, appropriate and give them the maximum time because it is a costly item.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't necessarily want to open up the public hearing again, but I did hear the owners say that they were willing to do it, and that I assume 3 years would be adequate to you. So they're nodding yes, and so we'll go with that.
So I'll make a motion that we recommend to City Council that the property at 1051 West Mountain Street be called the Hathaway House, and that we add this to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and also grant the Mills Act with the conditions that staff read.
Second?
Second.
Well,
Okay, we have
Okay,
a motion from
seconds.
Commissioner Shire and a second from Commissioner Cragnati to approve with conditions, or approve recommending with conditions. Roll call will be Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cragnati,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Chair Bador.
Yes.
Motion passes.
No, I love the house. It's just this wood window placement
Yes.
so has me going again. But if you're willing to do it, thank you very much.
Yes.
Congratulations. We appreciate your
Thank you.
dedication to historic integrity and enjoy doing the work. So, are we ready to go on to the next?
Give me 1 second to
Okay.
write this down so I don't lose it.
It is a little strange.
me know when you're ready.
Okay. Are you ready to go?
Crazy. Okay, so now we're on 7B, 3010 Edmonton Road.
Okay, thank you. So next we are considering a Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for 3010 Edmonton Road. This is a single-family house located in the Chevy Chase Canyon neighborhood as seen on both of these maps. And to give you guys an overall history, it's a single-family house built in 1928 in the Spanish colonial revival style. The original resident of the house is also the architect, Charles A. Hunter. Hunter designed the house for his family, and he lived there for 6 years. Mr. Hunter was born in Paterson, New Jersey, and he learned the field of architecture while working as a draftsman. Upon moving to Southern California, he worked for prominent architect Reginald Johnson, and eventually opened up his own firm and worked on a number of residential designs spanning the Southwest region. In addition to his own house at 3010 Edmonton Road, he also designed the landmark San Clemente Casino in Orange County, several residences in the Chevy Chase Canyon area of Glendale, other projects in Dana Point, Las Vegas, and Redlands. Some of his work has also been featured in Architectural Digest, as seen in these 2 pages here. The top is one of his residential projects in Beverly Hills, and the bottom picture is another house in Laguna Beach. He eventually relocated to Laguna Beach, where he continued to operate his firm. He sold the house to Louisa Frazier when he decided to move, and Mr. Frazier sold the house to Luella S. Ballerino in 1935. And then in 1952, a car salesman named Howard Johnson bought the house. There have been numerous subsequent residents, and the current owners purchased the house in 2014. So the house exhibits a number of its character-defining features. This includes its asymmetrical form due to its combination of 1- and 2-story volumes. It has a combination of a low-pitched gabled roof and a shed roof, both clad with red clay tile. The walls are clad in stucco. The metal gate and pavers, however, do not appear to be original to the property. Extensive landscaping fronts the property. The main entrance is recessed within an arched opening. However, the front door does not appear to be original, as seen in the top left picture. And then fenestration consists of wood windows that are fixed and casement windows. They have a variety of planter boxes, awnings, and wrought ironwork. There are also stained glass windows of various sizes that are possibly not original to the house. In the northwest corner of the house, the second story projects over the first and is given visual support by wood. And it's also not clear if the bay window here is original or a later addition. The house also has a detached garage at the end of a stamped concrete driveway along the north facade of the house, as seen here. And then moving on to alterations, there appear to be a few additions made to the house, some of which there are permits, some for which permits do not exist. The first major addition is the 2-story addition made at the northwest corner of the house in 1978 to an existing bathroom. The addition wraps around the corner of the house to the rear facade of the property and is also partially visible from the front. There are a set of exterior stairs alongside this addition, and the assessor's notes from 1978 also indicate a small addition at the 1-story wing at the front corner of the house, but there was no permit for this addition. There have also been some changes made to the rear, such as this wood deck added at a later date. A pool was also added in 1968. And another major addition is a permit from 1966 was for the remodeling of a wood balcony, and although it's not clear, it's likely that this second-story projection here with supports was the enclosure of this balcony, and it also wraps around to the front and is evidenced by the roof line here. And so the application suggests the property might be significant under Criterion 3 for association with architect Charles Hunter. Although Charles Hunter was fluent in period revival architecture of the 20s and 30s, and he was an active architect in the broader Southwest region, his work did not make any significant contributions to the broader field of architecture. The application also suggests the property might be significant under Criterion 3 as an excellent example of Spanish colonial revival style, and although the house exhibits a number of its character-defining features, the additions made to the house have compromised a significant portion of its material and design integrity. Furthermore, the architectural elements do not stand out in a distinct or unique manner in the broader context of Spanish colonial revival houses in Glendale. As mentioned before, the threshold to meet this criterion for the style is higher. So for these reasons, staff believes the property does not meet Criterion 3 for listing on the Glendale Register. Thank you.
Okay. Public hearing. So we have, I'm sorry, I'm all messed up here. Okay, I have one card for Narba Shervanian.
Good evening, members of the committee. How are you? Thank you for your time. My name is Narbe Shervanian, attorney. This is my wife, Lynette Shervanian. We own this beautiful home that has been coined Casa Bonita by everybody that knows us in the house. We've been fortunate to own it since 2014. We know that the prior owners took very good care of this property and went to great lengths to maintain its original character. I know that for some of the windows that were replaced by the veils, that artists from the local community were hired to come paint them to match the grain of the original windows. I know that the veils were Spanish architecture lovers, but there's nobody that loves Spanish architecture more than this beautiful woman behind me.
You got them.
In the legal world, I operate a law firm here in Glendale and represent a lot of community members here when they get wronged by people. But we speak of things in the totality of circumstances, the big picture sometimes. When we're taking cases to trial and to, trying them to peers of our community, to the jury, we try and kind of dumb things down and not focus on minor details and kind of think of things as a totality. And I don't think there's any other property in Glendale that stops you in its tracks like this property does. I come from Calabasas. There's no Spanish properties in Calabasas where I grew up, but Glendale has a lot of Spanish homes. But I don't think any of them stop you in the tracks like this does. And how do I know that? Because when I'm waking up in the morning to go to court or to go to the office, we have grandparents pushing their grandchildren, and they stop underneath that arch, and they sit down and they look at this property. Members on our street walk with their families and dogs, and all of them stop in front of this property and just gaze at it for an hour, minutes, take pictures, and they really do appreciate it. Personally, having read the recommendation that's being submitted to the committee, I think it's just an abuse of discretion. I think we are looking at a minute percentage of things with this property versus looking at the big picture. And I think if the property is not preserved, we'll be doing generations before us and generations after us a disservice. We've taken great lengths to maintain the property's character. We're young professionals. We could have taken out these windows that don't close well and don't hold back noise, and wake our babies up when loud cars drive up and down our street, and put in wood windows, vinyl windows, or some aluminum sliders that Councilman Morgan would have loved. But we chose to maintain everything the way that it is and to make do with what we've been so fortunate to own. This property was constructed by Charles Hunter. I'm not too familiar with his work, but having been published in Architectural Digest, I think means something. Pablo Picasso was not always Pablo Picasso. He may have not been published in Architectural Digest of its kind, but Mr. Hunter's work was. And we recently found out from our neighbor, the Spitzman family, that the beloved Chevy Chase Country Club that just opened has a huge mural in the restaurant, and our property is actually depicted on that mural. So Casa Bonita, or 3010 Edmonton Road, dates back to old times. And I think our property actually meets multiple criteria that's listed in the historic qualifying requirements. We're not just talking about a notable architect here. We're not only talking about the exceptional architectural characteristic of the home. I think that our home meets multiple criteria here. And if the committee is inclined to grant a property that has French Provence and Spanish flavors, and a large portion of the property is not, quote unquote original, and to deny this property, which I think meets more of these criterion than maybe other homes, I think this would be an abuse of discretion. Either way, we respect your decision. We would like to see the property preserved because the next owners of the property might want to build a nice modern box on Edmonton Road and paint it bright yellow or green like my neighbor. And I think that would just be a complete disservice. And I think Charles Hunter would probably be doing some cartwheels or in his grave. But either way, we thank you for your time. And if you have any questions for us, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we close the public hearing, would you like to speak? No? Okay. All right. Let's get to it. Who's first?
I'll let you go, Chris.
Well, it does go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for bringing this before us today. We always appreciate homeowners that love their properties and take care of them well and respect the history of Glendale. And so thank you very much. I had, and also thank you for making a special opportunity for me to come see your place after working hours. So anyway, I really enjoyed the visit to your home. It's a very unique setting, kind of in the wooded area, very private. I think from the street, the house shows very well. And I also appreciate your honest comments to us today. And I want you to make sure you know that no matter what decisions made here today, takes nothing away from this beautiful, special home and its gorgeous architecture for what it is. So please enjoy it, regardless of what decisions made today. My comments on the house specifically, like I say, for the front facade, I think obviously shows the best, although some of the alterations and modifications are visible still from the street. As I went around to the back and spent quite a bit of time just kind of looking at the details of the changes in windows, the alterations, the architectural significance, or I should say the exemplary example of Spanish architecture began to disintegrate a little bit for me. And I had to spend a lot of time making sure that was, I was in agreement with the staff's recommendation, because obviously they make a recommendation, but we make up our own decisions here. And I think it's unfortunate because the house began as something with quite high integrity, but I think prior to you owning it, some of the alterations as far as filled-in balcony, that's got no windows, it's really kind of a filled-in box on that upper level. The way those additions were handled wasn't really in the best architectural design for the house. And I spent a little time looking at the window details for all of the new windows that have been added in some of those addition areas, and even the sills are different, and the way the construction is different. The back balcony, or I should say the back wood, what are you calling that? Deck, thank you. The deck is a little bit kind of large and obtrusive. That probably wouldn't have been like that in its original design. We would have celebrated more the architectural feeling of the house, and so that deterred me a little bit as well. And so as I looked, I felt like the architectural features really lost something on kind of the other three facades, and because you have to look at all four facades, I think for me, I would have to agree with staff's recommendation that it doesn't quite rise to the level of nominating it on the register. But all that said, taking nothing away from the beautiful architecture of the house that it is.
I'll go.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I agree with Desiree. I mean, I love the house. I love the people that own it. There's like Commissioner Shire has said, it takes nothing away from this house. But you know, if Charles Hunter were to come back today, he would look at the house and he goes, "This isn't like that. This isn't like that. That's not what I intended." And the problem is, which I mentioned at the time, there are so many Spanish colonial revival homes, and it really has to rise to almost perfection anymore. And sadly, there are changes, and they do detract from, they may work very well in the house, but they do detract from what Mr. Hunter originally intended. And for me, I would be unfaithful to all the other homes that we have said, well, these rise to this certain level, that sadly, because of the alterations, this house does not rise to. It doesn't mean that it's not a beautiful house. It doesn't mean it's not a house that I think everybody in the city of Glendale would love. But I just can't go to that point where saying that, yeah, this is the house that should be on the Glendale Register. Not like I said that it isn't beautiful. It's just there are too many alterations that don't let it rise to that level, sadly. But that's about it.
Okay, shall I? Yes, thank you very much for bringing the home forward. I can see why people sit on your stoop or on your steps and look at it. It's quite enchanting, the way the vines are growing over it. It's just so quite magical back there. And the backyard with that oak tree is really, really stunning. It's interesting that you said that you think the house meets many criteria. I would encourage you to go back and watch some old Historic Preservation Commission meetings. It is very hard for some of these homes to reach the criteria. The bars are very high. This is actually probably the easiest criteria to meet is number 3, the one we're discussing. It's very hard to reach the others. But that said, I agree with the other commissioners. It is a beautiful home. There's no question. When you bring a home to this sort of forum, it's hard because it's hard not to take the situation personally, I'm sure, and has nothing to. Our decision here should, like they said, not detract at all from the glory of the space. And I love that you love Spanish, and I think it's really great that you guys have brought it forward. I think the more people do this, the more appreciation in general the community gets for architecture. But me too, walking around the property, it's pretty obvious where changes have been made. And the goal is for those changes to not be obvious in a historic home. If there are changes made to them, and changes are granted over time, people have done additions to Mills Acted homes, but they're done under great scrutiny and with really, really great dedication to the style and making sure that everything is cohesive and unified and there aren't differences in, like she was saying, windowsills and things like that. This is probably a testament to maybe the property having had several different owners over time and modifying for the purpose of what it's like to live in the house, not so much what it's like to look at it from the outside. Like that balcony that was enclosed is an amazing master bedroom closet, but it's not really so amazing from the outside anymore. So, this house was modified to make it a modern, great living space on the interior, not necessarily to enhance its glory. Fortunately, they didn't skimp and they didn't do aluminum sliders and some other things. But there's a chance. Well, you'd be surprised. You still got to get a permit for windows, and it's not that easy. Don't go crazy. So anyway, I'm going to just sort of echo what the other commissioners have said and what staff has said. We do really appreciate that you brought it forward. It would be hard for me to vote in support of a nomination.
Okay, well, thank you very much for bringing it forward. I have a couple comments in response to some of your comments. I think while I agree with you that, and I remember saying this at one point, the details may all be there, but, something has to rise to the level of, as a holistic statement for architecture, it has to rise to the level of being distinctive and meeting the criteria, and some of the details, granted, are not there, and maybe they could be, and I don't know whether there's been any discussion about if there are any things that could be done through the Mills Act to bring it more in acceptable alliance with what we envision, because I actually think it's a really distinctive home, and I think the front elevation and the way it's framed and the way it sits on the property is significant, actually. I think this house has some things about it that are really uniquely grandiose. And one of the things that I have to remark on, because we've debated pool additions and backyards a lot, is that I think your backyard configuration with the naturalistic landscaping and the small pool is one of the best I've ever seen in a historic home. You know, some of them are awful because people put in gigantic pools and too much hardscape, and you have a very, very nice setting back there. You know, we have a house next door, actually, to the Lovewell's house that has a huge addition on it, and it's been landmarked. I would be willing to say yes to the house with Mills Act provisions to make some change-outs. So that's my opinion.
What change-outs did you have in mind?
Well, I think some of the windows, I don't think I would go, I thought that the additions and the deck were, the deck, I don't see any problem with that. People sit decks on houses that are old all the time, and that one has actually been shoehorned in pretty nicely. Yes, it's a big deck, but to me it seems to fit in with the house configuration-wise. The enclosed balcony is problematic, but it's not on the street frontage, so I don't think anything would have to be done with that. Some of the window change-outs and door change-outs might be required. 3 windows and 2 doors. I would definitely put that in there. But, you know, I just feel that the house meets the qualification. I also looked up Hunter, and he seems to be pretty often referenced on the internet. He was in a couple architectural books alongside people like Carlton Winslow, and, you know, so that doesn't mean he's, you know, famous or great, but, you know, I could make the jump, although, as Chris said, the bars are very high on practically everything except number 3. We have at times, you know, gone with a beautiful intact Spanish home that isn't way over the top distinctive. But I think this house has some distinctive architecture in its front elevation, in the way it sits on the property. It's very reminiscent of an old European kind of Mediterranean Spanish house, and with the flat roof lines on the top and the way the windows are arranged on the facade. So that's my opinion. I would have said yes, but I understand why. You know, if you look objectively at all the requirements, there are things there that may knock it out of qualification, may disqualify it. Anybody want to argue with me?
No, I mean, look. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just say I agree. I would, I was going to say just keep talking. You know, tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I said it would be
exactly
hard for me. I didn't say it would be impossible. I was going to ask Jay
Exactly.
if he.
What?
Well, but Jay, the staff report didn't include any recommendations. Is that because you don't think that there could be? I don't mean you. I mean staff.
For staff, the bigger issues were the additions. The addition at the corner that's visible from the street, the deck addition, and frankly, we do care about how additions look on historic properties. The Commission's designated many properties that aren't perfectly original and have additions, but the balcony conversion to the closet is pretty rudimentary in its detailing and design. Our experience working with owners is, yeah, we'll change the roof, we'll change the stucco, we'll change the windows, but don't talk to us about changing our square footage. So there's a presumption that people are not interested in doing that. If the Shrevanians were interested, we could open the hearing and you could ask them about that. In our opinion, the house just had too many strikes against it. We acknowledge also that it's a lovely house and sits really nicely on the street and looks great, but just doesn't quite pass our threshold.
Let me quickly look at my notes and see if I had anything else I wanted to say.
Can you think of specific things, Arlene, that you think?
Well, you know, I guess I could open up the public hearing again and say, since the commission has a consensus to, and staff to feel that that enclosed balcony is, you know, really, that's the showstopper?
No, there's
No,
there's a large addition at the corner that,
Can we look at that
yeah, if we
addition?
can, pretty much, yeah, highlight.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, I didn't have as much a problem with that as I did with the enclosed closet.
You want to open this machine?
It's also not clear if there was an addition made at the one-story wing, but the assessor's notes in 1978 said there was some stuff here. So really, the only thing there was determined for was the two-story addition made to an existing bathroom and the balcony at the back.
Mm.
But he did note something here, so.
Generally, we trust the assessor's records when they say there's an addition because they're raising the taxes because of the increased square footage. Sometimes we have permits that were issued but never acted on, so we can't guarantee something was actually built just because there's a permit for it.
Well, and I think we have to keep coming back to, if these alterations were coming before us today for approval, would we grant them? And there's no way I would grant approval on designing infill of a balcony like that, or that upstairs fill-in, because it's just, like I say, it's just detracting from the original architectural essence and integrity. And so, like I say, as much as it's a beautiful style, I think there's enough, even the front facade begins to lose it. I personally don't feel like that front bay window is original. You typically would not see that on a Spanish style house. It would have been a later, I don't know if you have an enlarged version, but
Is that the kitchen?
yeah, that's the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, so that's
Yeah, the
detracting.
bay-
You've
the
got
bay
the stained
window
glass that
is
doesn't appear to be
odd.
original from the front facade. So every facade has a little bit of alterations that I can't, in fairness to the owner, ask for all of those modifications to be changed and undo this beautiful house that they're enjoying, they're benefiting from. I think it's just, to me, I stand before staff's recommendations. With that, I would be happy to make a motion unless there's more discussion.
Go ahead.
I move that we recommend to City Council that the property at 3010 Edmonton Road not be designated as a historic resource in Glendale on the Register of Historic Properties, and therefore not be granted a Mills Act.
Second.
I second.
Roll call.
Roll call is Commissioner Crignati,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Chair Vidor.
No.
So we have 3-1, motion passes to not recommend for designation or Mills Act.
But enjoy your beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful property.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again for bringing it forward. We really appreciate it.
And just so the property owners plus the public know the process at this point, you still have the right to move forward to the city council hearing, where you could present this again to city council, or if you choose not to, you can give us a little note that you're withdrawing the nomination, then that makes it official. If, just send us an email.
Send me like a one-line email is fine, like I would withdraw my application.
And, you know, given, I'll just make one more comment, given the discussion and some of the things that were brought up as being problematic, I know it seems a little, you know, far-fetched, but if you did decide, I know you've got your hands full with a lot of things, if you did decide you wanted to pursue those things, but, you know, it is what it is.
And remember, we just make a recommendation. What his point was, we're only recommending to city council. If you want to go make your
Yeah.
case in front of the city council, you should consider doing that.
Wait, hang on.
And, yeah, if you want to close the public hearing, then we can answer things informally.
Yeah, we're
Oh,
closing?
yeah, we'll run through the rest of the agenda. and then-
Okay, yeah, all right. So, let me get back on track here, I'm sorry. So the next thing is planning division updates and informational briefings.
Yeah, and we have nothing official, just to keep you up to date. We are working, hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have an answer or at least the beginning of an answer, about how the city would like to move forward looking at construction or projects adjacent to National Register and Glendale Register properties. We are also working on, Deepika's helped out with research, and we're moving forward on determining how to move forward with the interim review policy for historic districts. Ultimately, that has to go back to council. We heard from the commission last month. You did ask for us to return with information about what other cities do. We've compiled that research, but just weren't ready to bring it to you this month. So hopefully next month we'll have a report on that. And so things are moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, I guess with that, the meeting is adjourned. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.